When I met Sean, I was convinced I'd found the perfect man. And as he recited his vows to me on our wedding day, I felt like the luckiest girl in the world. I was marrying a man who was promising to care for me and love me unconditionally for the rest of our lives. He told me he adored more than any other woman in the whole world. Things were great for the first few years. I loved being married and we had a lot of fun together. Our friends would comment on how happy we looked when we were together. We quickly became known as the golden couple throughout our social circles. He couldn't keep his eyes, and indeed his hands, off me. I was proud to introduce him to everyone I knew as my husband. Maybe it is unrealistic to expect things to stay that way forever. People talk of the 7-year itch. For us it was just 6. It was actually the night of our 6th wedding anniversary that I first had a suspicion something wasn't quite right with Sean. I should have been his main focus that night, but for some reason he seemed much more interested in his phone. It was as if he was planning something, but he wouldn't tell me what it was. A few days later he made an excuse and went out on his own for the evening, returning 5 hours later without any kind of explanation as to where he had been. He wasn't drunk. I almost wish he had been, as that may have gone some way to explaining where he had been. It was at that point I first suspected he may have been having an affair. Life went back to normal, although my nagging doubts about him remained. We both had jobs to go to, and with us not having children, we continued to spend our spare time together. But as nice as he was being to me, I couldn't help shake off the feeling something wasn't quite right. He would regularly check his phone for messages, and he made sure he never let it out of his sight. There were also times where he would seem distant when I was speaking to him, which wasn't like him at all, as he had always shown a genuine interest in what I had to say. It was one of his best qualities. Once a month he would do his disappearing trick, and I quickly noticed a pattern. On the first Friday of the month he would leave the house at 6:30 p.m. and not get back until almost midnight. He didn't do this on any other day, only once a month, and only on the first Friday. He made various excuses as to where he was going: working a late shift at the office, having drinks out with friends, watching an important football match, the usual kind of thing a man having an affair might use as their cover. None of it seemed feasible to me though, as there was never any evidence of him drinking, and I had never heard of his company keeping the office open late on a Friday evening. It was after the 4th mystery night out that I raised the subject with my best friend, Lucy. I always turned to her when I had a problem, and more often than not she would come up with a solution, or a reasonable explanation as to what was going on. "I think Sean is having an affair," I blurted out. "What? No. Surely not. He's been acting strange for ages now. I can think of no other explanation for it." "Acting strange? Come on, Ruth, you need to do better than that. All men act strange from time to time, but it doesn't automatically mean they've been out cheating." "Okay, well, once a month, and always on the same day, he goes out and doesn't come home for hours. Then he acts all vague when I ask him where he's been. I can tell he's lying about where he's been." "What day does he go out?" Lucy asked, curiously. "It's always the first Friday of the month." "The first Friday of the month?" "Yes. So the first Friday after payday? You mean he goes out for a few hours one Friday each month and you think it's suspicious?" I nodded. "He's going out to spend his wages at the pub with his mates, surely?" "Well, that's what I thought originally, but when he comes home there's never any evidence of him drinking. I can always tell with Sean, he doesn't hide being drunk very well. And anyway, he always takes his car." "Maybe he's given up alcohol? You said he's been trying to get into shape recently." "Perhaps, but why not just tell me that then? Why be so secretive about it all?" "True, it doesn't make sense to keep something like that a secret, especially from your wife. And then of course there's his phone. He won't let me anywhere near it. He is definitely hiding something on there." "Like what?" "Text messages, probably." "Have you spoken to him about it?" "Not specifically, but I always ask if he's okay, if there's anything he wants to talk to me about." "Well, he's not going to respond to those kinds of questions, is he? He is a man after all." "True. You either need to trust him or what? Find out what's on his phone." I wasn't overly comfortable in reading Sean's phone, but I realized it might be the only way to find out what was actually going on with him. Conscious that what I found out might be seriously bad news for our relationship, I bided my time and waited for an opportunity to check his messages. It was a Sunday evening towards the end of the month when Sean finally let his guard down long enough for me to check his phone. He had gone for a shower and had uncharacteristically left the screen unlocked. It only took a few seconds for me to see his messages, but that's all that I needed. There were only 2 saved messages, everything else had been deleted. There was one from him and a reply from her. He had saved her name in his phone as Alexandra. Sean, are we still on for next Friday? Alexandra, yes, see you at 7 p.m. as usual. My worst suspicions had suddenly come true. He had been lying to me. Every month for the past 4 months he had been meeting up with another woman, and he was planning on doing it again next week. But what for? Sex? Who was she? A prostitute? I was furious, but I composed myself enough to put the phone back where I had found it and walk away. I went outside into the garden and called Lucy. It's true, he's cheating on me. I saw proof on his phone. I was almost shouting and struggling to control my anger. Calm down, Ruth. Tell me exactly what you read. She's called Alexandra. They've arranged to meet next Friday. It's the 1st of the month. It's her. She's his regular hookup. Were there any other messages? Did they say anything else to each other? No, they were just making arrangements to see each other. She said as usual, so it's clearly not the first time they've met up. I presume he's deleted all the other messages she's sent him. Okay, so all we know is they've made plans to meet up. That doesn't mean anything. It certainly doesn't prove they're sleeping together. Oh, come on. It doesn't look good, does it? They've met up before and he has no intention of telling me about it. Have you got any idea who she is? No, none whatsoever. I paused, allowing myself to breathe. I've never known an Alexandra, and I've never heard him mention someone with that name, and he tells me all about the people he works with, unless he's purposely never mentioned her. Okay. Lucy went quiet for a moment. So what do I do? I needed help from my friend. I was lost. Well, you could ask him about it, sit him down and make him explain everything. But then he'd know you read his phone, and if it turns out to be nothing, then you might lose his trust for a while. But it could be something. I know. There is another thing you could do. What's that? Well, you know he has these plans for next Friday. You could follow him, see where he goes and who he meets. Sounds risky. A little, but not if you are clever. You could follow him in your car, see where he goes, wait outside. If it turns out to be something innocent, then you could leave and get home before him. He'd never need to know you were there. But if it turns out to be something bad, then I confront him. Exactly. It might be a difficult situation, but you'd know for sure either way, I guess. Yeah. I could come with you if you like. For moral support, I'd like that. Thanks, Lucy. Have a think about it. We have a few days to plan what we're going to do. Let me know by Thursday if you want to go ahead with it, and we'll do what we have to do to get to the bottom of this. But in the meantime, just sit tight, don't let on that you know something. You never know, he might tell you everything in a day or two anyway. It might turn out to be nothing. I took my friend's advice and said nothing about it to Sean, which was difficult as I wanted to scream in his face. I gave him every opportunity to tell me about what he had planned for the following Friday, but he declined the chance to do so. He did tell me the usual story of him going out to meet friends and wouldn't be back until late. I told him that was fine, but inside I was crying. Why was this happening to me? Sean was the last guy in the world I'd expect to have an affair. He just didn't seem the type. Or maybe I'd read him wrong this whole time. Was it something I'd done? Was I not a good enough wife for him? The more I thought about it, the angrier I got, so I tried my best to ignore my emotions as I waited for Friday night to come around. I spoke to Lucy on the Thursday and we finalized our plan. Following him in my car seemed too risky as he could easily recognize it, so Lucy agreed to pick me up and do the driving for us. We would follow him to wherever it was he was meeting Alexandra and then decide on a course of action when we got there. The thought of interrupting them partway through a passionate embrace was terrifying, but it could be the only way of knowing for sure what was really going on. Sean said very little and didn't once look at me as he was getting ready to go out on Friday evening. In some ways he seemed somewhat guilty already. It was like he knew what he was about to do was wrong. He spent a long time shaving but little time doing his hair. The clothes he put on weren't particularly smart and he didn't even bother with aftershave or deodorant. Maybe this was to put me off the trail, to not have me suspect he was preparing to meet another woman. But I knew he was. It was just after 6:30 p.m. when he left. I watched as he got in the car and drove away. Immediately I ran outside and jumped into Lucy's car. She had been waiting outside with her engine running ready for a quick getaway. The layout of our street meant Sean was unlikely to have seen her waiting, and even if he did, he wouldn't have recognized her car as it was new. We set off immediately and a few seconds later we had already caught up with his BMW. It was red and so easy to spot. We followed him for a few minutes, managing to keep our distance, sometimes with a car in between us. He drove into the town center and suddenly stopped outside a row of shops. It was evening, so the shops were closed and there was plenty of space for him to park. We did the same but on the opposite side of the road and well away from him. We killed the engine and began to wait for his next move. We had an excellent view of him and his car so would be able to see exactly what he did next. Nothing happened for 3 or 4 minutes while he stayed in his car. He was probably texting her, arranging their meet, I thought. Then suddenly his car door swung open and he quickly jumped out, remotely locking the car behind him as he walked away. He paused for a moment as he looked up at the row of shops in front of him before approaching one of them and knocking confidently on the door. The shop window shutters were pulled down and the door was locked, so he had to wait for someone to come and let him in. Finally someone did let him in, a woman. The sun was setting and the light was fading, so neither of us managed to get a very good look at her. There was no kiss or embrace though. Instead she quickly showed Sean inside and locked the door again behind him. It was then that Lucy nudged me. "Do you know what this shop is, Ruth?" "No, I can't remember the order of these shops, and the shutters are down, I can't see." "Look at the sign. Alexandra Bridal. He's gone into a bridal shop?" "Didn't you say her name was Alexandra?" "That must be her. It's her shop. So the woman he's having an affair with is a bridal entrepreneur." "Yes, well it looks like it. God, I bet she's loaded." "Is that all he sees in her? The fact she has money and a business?" "I'm sure there's a reasonable explanation for this." Lucy was trying her best to stay positive. I sighed. Nothing I had seen so far had made me change my mind. "So what do we do now?" "I think we should wait a little while, give him chance to change his mind or come back out or something. Maybe he's there for another reason, you never know." "What other reason could there possibly be?" "I don't know. I just don't think we should jump the gun." "Okay, how long do we wait?" 15 minutes, maybe 20. If he hasn't come out by then, I reckon you'll be well within your rights to go and investigate." We waited patiently in the car, one eye on the clock, another on the shop door. There was no sign of movement and the street was quiet with few other cars now driving past. The shop was closed but the lights inside were switched on. Above the shop was, presumably, a flat belonging to the owner, also with its lights turned on. There looked to be occasional movement of shadows behind a curtain, but it was impossible to tell who it was or what they were doing. "Another 5 minutes and I'm going in, I can't stand this much longer." I was becoming desperate. "Have you ever been inside the shop before?" Lucy asked. "No, I've never needed to. When I got married I went to London to buy my dress." "Have you?" "No, I had my dress custom made and sent over from America." "Of course you did. So neither of us has met this Alexandra woman before then." "Which is probably a good thing. I'd hate for Sean to be spending time with someone we knew. That would make it worse, I think." "Yeah, perhaps." Lucy checked her phone and quickly replied to a message. "Just my Kev, checking in." What's he up to tonight then? Oh, he had to stay late at work, finish off a project. Fair enough. You've got a good one there, Luce. I can't imagine Kev messing you around the way Sean's been doing to me recently. No, well, I certainly hope not. He works hard at his job, so I don't mind him staying late occasionally. I've had enough of waiting. I'm going in. I reached for the handle and opened the car door. Okay. I'm coming with you. We got out of the car together and closed our doors, being careful not make too much noise, not that there was anyone else around on the street to hear us. We tentatively walked across the road towards the bridal shop. We could see the light leaking through the gaps in the window shutters and also through the front door, which was mostly made of glass but had a blind drawn down obscuring most of the view inside. I took a deep breath and knocked loudly and firmly on the door. We waited 30 seconds for an answer, but no one came. So I knocked again. Finally, we heard some movement inside, followed by the sound of the door being unlocked. It opened slowly and a tall, dark-haired woman came into view. She was older than the two of us, perhaps in her early to mid-40s. She was smartly dressed in a white blouse and navy pencil skirt, and she seemed very surprised to see us standing in her doorway. "I'm sorry, the shop is closed. We're not here for your shop. My name is Ruth and this is my friend Lucy. I'm looking for my husband," I replied sternly. "Your husband?" "Yes, he's called Sean. We watched him come in here 20 minutes ago. He's not here. You must be mistaken. He is here. We saw him knock on this door and you let him in. His car is parked over there. I don't know anyone called Sean. I'm sorry. Please leave." The woman began to close the door slowly in front of us. "Are you Alexandra?" I shouted, causing the woman to temporarily stop closing the door. "Yes. I know he's been texting you. He arranged to meet you here tonight, and I don't think it's for the first time either." "Okay." Alexandra took a deep breath. "He is here. But it's not what it looks like." "What does it look like?" "Well, to you and your friend, I'm sure it looks a lot worse than what it is. We are certainly not having an affair if that's what you're worried about." "So what is he doing in there with you then?" "I can't say." "Oh, come on, you know that won't do. I'm not going to leave without seeing him, and I don't want to create a scene out on the street, so you're going to have to let us in." "Okay, you can come into the shop for a minute, but I really think you should let Sean explain everything when he gets home later." Alexandra stepped aside, allowing both myself and Lucy to enter the shop. It was a beautiful space, we couldn't deny that. To be truthful, we were both a bit in awe as we were suddenly surrounded by dozens of elegant wedding dresses hanging from the racks attached to the long side wall. There were mirrors and podiums and comfy chairs. Pretty flowers decorated the few empty spaces, which somehow made the room even more beautiful and feminine. There was a long curtain drawn across one corner, presumably a changing area, and there was a door at the back of the room, leading to another area. I composed myself and continued the conversation with Alexandra, who had by now closed and locked the door to the shop behind us. "Where is he? I really think you should go home, and let him explain when you see him later." "Why can't I see him now?" "I just don't think that's a good idea." Alexandra was becoming stressed but remained insistent. "Listen, something strange is going on here. I came to see my husband, to find out what's going on with you two, and I'm not leaving until I see him." "I can't." "Rubbish. Come on, Lucy." I couldn't wait any longer. Alexandra wasn't going to help us, so without waiting for permission I headed through the shop towards the door in the corner. I pushed it open and stepped through into what looked like a storeroom and additional workspace. Lucy was right behind me and, despite a few half-hearted shouts for us to stop, Alexandra hadn't yet followed us, instead deciding to stay by the front door. She knew by now we weren't going to be stopped. The storeroom was full of more dresses, some were in protective covers or packed up in boxes ready to be collected, and others were halfway through being altered and were in various stages of completion. A couple of spare undressed mannequins were propped up in the corner, and there was also a large desk with a sewing machine, a laptop, and a pile of papers. There was another outside door, marked as a fire exit, and also a large staircase leading upstairs, presumably to the flat with the lights on we had seen from the street. This had to be where Sean was. Cautiously I began to ascend the stairs, Lucy still close behind. When I got to the top I was indeed at the entrance to a nice flat, which seemed much larger than expected, based on the size of the shop underneath. There were several doors along a landing, one had a sign on it for a bathroom, another looked to be a kitchen, with more rooms further along. I slowly made my way through the flat and despite what Alexandra had been saying, I still had a horrible feeling I would find Sean in her bedroom. I came to the first of 3 white doors and slowly turned the handle. The light in the room was turned off, so I quickly located the switch and turned it on. I was in the bedroom, but Sean wasn't there. It was just a nice bedroom painted baby pink and dominated by a large double bed with turquoise bedding. It was minimalist in decoration, just a watercolor painting hanging from one wall. I couldn't decide if I was disappointed not to have found Sean yet or not. I turned the light off and left the room. The next white door along was already slightly open and the light was on. It was a dressing room with a beautiful white dressing table and chair, and a long floor-length mirror dominating one of the walls. There was a rail with more wedding dresses hanging from it and several boxes of accessories, containing tiaras, veils and pieces of jewelry. It appeared to be an extension of the shop downstairs. It was another beautiful room. But there was still no sign of Sean. I pulled the door closed and moved along to what appeared to be the final room of the flat. The door to this room was closed, but I could hear a murmur of noise coming from inside. It sounded like a television was on, as well as some people talking quietly. My heart beat faster as I prepared to open the door. This was where Sean was, I was sure of it. I looked at Lucy, who was still with me. She didn't say anything. Instead she gave me a comforting smile and gestured for me to carry on and open the door. I took a deep breath and pushed down the handle. The door remained silent as it opened and I stepped inside the room. Nothing could have prepared me for what I then saw. The room was fairly large. It was the flat's dedicated living space. Decorated mostly white but with pink curtains covering the window and more watercolor paintings hanging on the walls, there was a flat-screen TV in the corner and various chairs and a couch positioned at various intervals in front of it. There was another long mirror propped up against one of the walls, and several inviting rugs and cushions were positioned on the floor. But it was not the nicely decorated room which took my breath away as I stood and surveyed the scene. Lucy and I were not alone in the room. There were 6 brides in there with us. They were all wearing beautiful wedding dresses along with additional sparkle in the form of tiaras and bridal jewelry. Some were wearing veils and some were holding tightly onto a bouquet of flowers. 2 of the brides were sat together on the couch in front of the TV, another 2 were together by the mirror, taking it in turns to elegantly approach it, as if they were walking down the aisle, no doubt. Another 2 brides were sat together on one of the rugs, joyfully flicking through a couple of bridal magazines as their large dresses puffed up around them. None of them had noticed us standing there yet, so I took another look around the room, inspecting each of the brides in turn. Something seemed strange. It wasn't just the fact that there were so many brides dressed up and congregated together in the same place at the same time. It was surely no coincidence that there was a bridal shop downstairs. It was something else, but I couldn't quite put my finger on it. Then, as I focused in on each of the groups of brides one more time, it suddenly dawned on me. All these brides were actually men. They were all dressed immaculately, each of them wearing the most feminine of wedding dresses. It was like a princess convention, with big skirts, petticoats, bows, veils and tiaras. Most seemed to be wearing wigs, some had put on makeup on too. Small subtleties gave them away as men though, such as height, posture, and shoe size. But it had taken me some time to work it out, so they were certainly doing something right. They were all clearly enjoying themselves, with occasional gasps and giggles erupting from the pairs whenever something overly cute or girly was seen or said. It was then I spotted Sean. He was one of the 2 brides sat on the couch in front of the TV. They were sat close together, their large dresses overlapping slightly. Each of them had a bouquet of flowers in their lap and both were deeply engrossed in what they were watching. It was a recording of Charles and Diana's royal wedding from 1981, a real-life fairy tale wedding and for many, the ultimate bridal fantasy. It had been mine when I was a little girl. Suddenly there was a hush in the room as everyone turned their attention to the TV as the video reached its most iconic moment, where Diana emerges from her carriage and reveals the splendor of her dress in full for the first time. Sean turned around briefly to gauge the reaction of the other brides, and in doing so saw me standing there in the doorway. His face visibly dropped and my heart sank. Lucy was as stunned as I was, neither of us knew what to do or say. Sean stood up carefully and walked over to us, his dress swishing gorgeously with each step he took. It was an incredible dress and I was immediately jealous of him wearing it. It was a beautiful silky bridal white color with a gloriously large, floaty skirt which led into a short train. The bodice sparkled a little as it caught the light and the sleeves were short and puffy and very pretty. He was wearing peep-toe white heels, but they didn't seem to slow him too much as he walked. Despite the long brunette wig and princess-like tiara, I could still see it was him. He was still my husband. My husband was dressed as a bride. "I can explain," he pleaded. "Don't say anything," I snapped back in disbelief. Alexandra then joined us in the room. She had seemingly been held back from following us up the stairs but had finally caught us up. "I'm so sorry, Sarah. Your wife was very insistent," she came in. "Sarah?" I turned to Alexandra. "Our brides use any name of their choice while they are here. There's never any judgment on my part." Sean nodded, confirming what had been said. "This is unbelievable." I was still lost for words. "Why don't you both come downstairs? We can have a chat and leave the other brides to their evening." Alexandra was trying desperately to fix the situation. I looked around the room. The other brides had by now all noticed us standing there and some of them had clearly become a little uncomfortable by the situation. I turned to Lucy for her opinion. She agreed we should step outside for a while, to calm down and to get the full story from Alexandra. But it was at this moment that a seventh male bride made his entrance to the room. He brushed past us in the doorway before executing a perfect twirl and then an elegant curtsy for the benefit of the others who were watching. His dress was as poofy and white as everyone else's and he wore a shoulder-length blonde wig, although his makeup wasn't great and his stubble quickly gave him away as a man. He took a few steps towards the mirror and then paused, taking in the applause from the other brides. He took view of his reflection for a moment and then turned back towards the four of us who were still standing there. "Oh my God. Kev?" Lucy screamed. The whole room was stunned into silence as a mortified Kev looked over at his wife. "I can explain," he pleaded. Sean was still stood there and everyone was a little lost for something to say. After several seconds of awkward silence, Alexandra stepped in and took me by the arm. "You both come with me, I'll tell you everything." Alexandra led us both out of the room, leaving a visibly shaking Kev and Sean with the 5 other brides. She took us back down the stairs to the storeroom where she pulled up 3 chairs to her desk and cleared a space. She took out a bottle of water from a small fridge and poured a little into a couple of glasses for us. "I'm sorry that just happened the way it did. I had no intention of embarrassing you both like that, or your husbands. You didn't give me chance to explain before. And I had no idea your husband was going to be here too, Lucy. In fact, he turned up just a minute after you had gone upstairs. What's going on up there? And why are our husbands involved?" Lucy asked, before taking a sip of her water. "It all started 6 months ago. I came up with an idea to start a wedding club for brides-to-be, or those interested in wedding planning. I've been in the industry for a long time now and I decided that I wanted to do something new, to come up with a way of passing on some of my knowledge, and to engage with those who share my genuine love of weddings. So I put an advert on an online wedding forum, to gauge interest and see if anyone would want to join such a club. I proposed meeting one evening a month. The plan was to get together as a group and discuss the bridal industry in detail. I'd answer questions, share my own experiences, that kind of thing. Within a week I'd received half a dozen replies from people saying they'd be interested in coming along, so I made all the arrangements for the first meeting. But the only thing was... "What?" Lucy muttered. I didn't realize when they contacted me on the forum. I only found out when they all arrived on the first night. The 6 people who turned up for the first meeting were all men. Including Sean? I asked. Yes. Sean was one of the first to contact me on the forum. He was at the first meeting. And he's been to every one since. Tonight is the 5th meeting. And Kev? Lucy added. No. Kev was a latter addition to the group. He's only been once before. Tonight is his 2nd night with us. It was Sean who invited him to come along. So basically you've created a secret wedding club for men to come and play dress up in wedding dresses? Lucy laughed, but it seemed to be more in disbelief than in joy. That wasn't the intention, not at all. And I know that's probably what it looked like when you walked in just now, but it's so much more than that. When I started the group, I imagined it being a place for women to come and share their wedding experiences with each other, so when 6 men turned up for the first meeting, it really threw me. But we went ahead with the evening as planned, and during that first meeting I was surprised that there was only really one topic everyone wanted to discuss: the dresses. Obviously wedding dresses are my life, so I was happy enough to talk to them in depth about the wedding dress industry, styles, designers, how to choose the perfect dress, how to wear them, how to look after them. Our discussions about the dresses were so in-depth, they carried on well into the second meeting. And by that point it had become clear to me that, like pretty much every little girl and grown-up woman, each of these men had their own secret bridal fantasy, and for the very first time they felt comfortable enough to share it with someone. They all talked about what their dream dresses might look like, and how they imagined they would feel given the chance to wear it. So, I decided to help make their bridal fantasies come true. Oh my God. My mind was racing as I pictured Sean as part of the group. Alexandra continued. So at the start of the 3rd meeting, I gave everyone free rein to choose any dress from my shop to wear for the night. I offered my opinions on suitable styles, but I was hardly needed. Most knew the dress they wanted, and those that didn't had the help of all the others. I provided them with wigs, female deodorant and makeup, if they wanted to take it that far, as well as limitless accessories, veils, tiaras, jewelry, bridal bouquets to hold anything which would enhance their experience. Upstairs I had created a safe space for them to be, so they could all play out their fantasies of being beautiful brides for a few hours. And now we do this at the start of each meeting. The first thing they do when they get here is choose the dress they want to wear. The traditional white princess dresses are the most popular, as you'd expect, but I encourage them all to try all the different styles at least once. Incredible! I whispered to myself, still not quite believing what I was hearing. Alexandra smiled as she carried on. I never expected the club to turn into this, but it just did. And I have to say, it's quite heartwarming, seeing the excitement and the happiness when they're all putting on their dresses and seeing their transformations take shape. It's more than just a physical transformation, much more than just putting on a dress, it's an emotional transformation too. They are able to forget all about their lives outside the shop for a while, even forget all about what is expected of them as men. Someone came up with the idea of everyone picking a female name for themselves, which I love. There is no awkwardness between them, they are comfortable being here, supportive of each other, and they open up and talk to each other, in a way men never usually do. I took a moment to compose myself and took a long sip of water. I looked at Lucy as I felt I was about to speak for the both of us. Well, I have to say, it was quite a shock to see all that, of course, but all things aside, you've created a quite beautiful space here. Your shop is heavenly and the living area upstairs too is just wonderful. Thank you, Alexandra replied with a smile. I've put my life's work into this shop. Like I say, this is about giving something back. I understand why these men feel the need to be discreet in coming here, I get it, which is why I try to be discreet on their behalf too. They all have wives, some have children, and as far as I know, you are the first 2 to have found out. I'm sorry if I came across as a crazy woman earlier, I had it in my head that Sean was having an affair. It's fine, think nothing more of it. Alexandra seemed genuine in her reply. So is the club going to continue? Lucy added. Of course. I have room for maybe 2 more brides to join, that would give us a nice round 10, including myself. I really hope you will let Sarah and Kirsty, sorry, Sean and Kev to carry on coming. It would be a shame to lose them after tonight. We try to do something a bit different each month. Last month I gave a demonstration on how to make bouquets, and then we practiced throwing them. Tonight we have a bit of a royal theme. We are watching Charles and Dee's wedding, then we were going to discuss how royal weddings dresses and wedding ceremonies have changed throughout history. A wedding history lesson? I interrupted. Exactly. And next month I was going to talk to them all about being a bridesmaid, demonstrate what they would need to do on the day, tasks and expectations of the role, and also talk about the differences between the role of a bridesmaid and a maid of honor. So next month they'll all be wearing bridesmaids' dresses? Lucy laughed. If they want to, yes. I have plenty to choose from in my shop. It does sounds kind of fun, Lucy added. She appeared to be much more comfortable with it all now, after having heard Alexandra's explanations. So was I. I took a final gulp of water to finish it off and then stood up from my chair. I glanced back up the stairs to where our husbands and the brides were. For a second I contemplated running back up there to see Sean again, but I didn't. Instead I turned to Lucy. Let's leave them to it, Lucy. They have some wedding history to learn. You sure? Lucy stood up from her chair. Very sure. Alexandra, it was nice to meet you. Please tell Sarah and Kirsty to enjoy the rest of their evening and we will see them when they get home. And with that I headed towards the entrance to the shop. Lucy followed me close behind. Alexandra unlocked the front door, said goodbye and waved us off. Back in the car Lucy and I looked back over towards the shop, and up at the window of the flat above, the light seeping through the closed curtains. We now knew what was going on up there, and it wasn't half as bad I had imagined. My husband wasn't having an affair after all, our marriage was safe. On the drive back, Lucy and I spoke at length about what we had seen that night. I pleaded with her not to be angry with Kev when he got home, and promised I wouldn't be angry with Sean either, despite all the stress his lies had put me through during the past few months. The worst thing we could have done at that point, in my opinion, was to embarrass the two of them any further. Instead I suggested we show them some support. The next day the four got together to discuss the wedding dress club, what it was exactly that made them want to join in the first place, and what was going to happen next. Sean told me that his trigger was our wedding day. Seeing me in my wedding dress and knowing how much I adored the experience of being a bride made him curious. For years he secretly longed to know what it might be like to experience a wedding from a female perspective, so a year or so ago he signed up to an online wedding forum, where he introduced himself as a bride to be called Sarah. He quickly became captivated by the world he now found himself in, and soon he was deep inside the online wedding community. He really enjoyed being involved in the general wedding planning chat and debate, and people would ask his opinion when choosing their wedding dresses and colors themes for their ceremonies. It was through the online forum that Sean saw Alexandra's advert for her wedding group. It seemed like too good an opportunity to pass, so he challenged himself to get in touch with her and to go along to the first meeting. He made contact as Sarah through the forum, but of course when he turned up to the first meeting, he was Sean. He later found out that another bride from the group, James, was actually one of his best friends from the forum, Jessica. Sean loved going to the group but hated that he couldn't say anything to me. When Alexandra introduced the idea of being able to dress as a bride during the meetings, he, like the other members of the group, found himself being able to live out his bridal fantasy for the very first time. Not only could he talk to others about being a bride, now he could actually experience being a bride as well, for a few hours at a time at least. Sean apologized for not being honest about where he had secretly been going each month, and realized the stress it had caused me in not knowing what my husband had been up to. It was the guilt of keeping a secret from me that led him to confiding in Kev instead, but this then resulted in an additional complication when Kev asked if he could come along to the next meeting. Both Lucy and I managed to see the funny side of this, eventually. We were now quite revealed though, that everything was out in the open. But the question remained, what would happen next month? Now their secret had been revealed, would they want to carry on going to the group? Had an element of the excitement been lost, or could they regain what they had before we'd found out? A few days later, I had a long conversation with Alexandra on the phone. I apologized again for the disruption to her meeting and for the way I had spoken to her. She said she understood where I was coming from, as the nature of what her male guests were doing that evening naturally meant that an element of secrecy was required, which would in turn cause some suspicion. I told her that I had given Sean my blessing to carry on coming to her group, and Lucy had done the same for Kev. I then went on to speak to her about an idea that I'd had. A few weeks later, it was time for the next meeting of the Wedding Dress Club. Sarah and Kirsty attended as usual, but this time they didn't need to worry about lying to me and Lucy about where they were going to be that night. We knew exactly where they were. As planned, Alexandra had created a whole evening of bridesmaid-related discussion and activities, and the 7 brides were given the opportunity to each pick out and wear one of her beautiful bridesmaids' dresses for the night. An hour or so into the meeting, and when everyone was settled in their chosen colorful dresses, Alexandra announced she had arranged another little surprise for the group. "Ladies, we have 2 very special guests at our group tonight. I'd like you to welcome Ruth and Lucy." And in we walked, wearing our own wedding dresses. There was a collective gasp from the room as we entered, not least from Sarah and Kirsty. It was a nice surprise for them this time though, not like the last occasion we had been in that room. Our 7 bridesmaids quickly put into practice what they had learned so far and fussed over us by leading us over to the seating area, smoothing our skirts, and we sat down, holding our bouquets and attaching our veils and accessories. Neither of us could stop giggling. It was a lot of fun. The 10 of us, Alexandra included, had the most wonderful evening. Everyone was relaxed in the knowledge that we were all there for the same reason, to indulge in our deepest bridal fantasies. Lucy and I answered every conceivable question about what it was really like to be a bride, such as how we chose our dresses, what we felt like as we walked down the aisle, and what our favorite moments of our wedding days were. It really was a shame when the night came to an end and we all had to change out of our dresses and go home. Alexandra invited us back to join the group anytime we wanted, but Lucy agreed with me that for us at least, a one-off visit was perhaps best. We had after all experienced our bridal fantasies for real with our own weddings, so we were happy to leave our new friends to live out theirs once a month on a Friday. That didn't stop us asking our husbands all about it when they got home though. We wanted to know all the details. Finding out Sean's secret love of weddings was surprising to say the least, but it without doubt brought us even closer together as a couple. I promised him that one day we would renew our vows, and when we did, it wouldn't be just me who would be making a trip to Alexandra Bridal to choose a new dress. I would insist that he came along and chose one too.